Well, they've got this all well
done.
Yeah, I like this. Right. So let's see what have they sent us. Oh, and we got a letter here as well.
From Santa.
Well, from Hornby. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to take all these items that they very kindly sent over and turn them into a winter/Christmas themed diorama in around an afternoon, maybe a few hours work, just to show what kind of things that we can achieve with a few simple scenic items.
Yeah.
So are you game for that?
I'm game.
First up, I can see some figures.
Oh, right.
So we've got some town people, some people sitting, and some more town people. That seems to be all the people. So what I'm thinking is, I'm looking at them, and we can use them as the basis for people in a kind of winter scene.
Maybe around some Christmas trees, somebody selling Christmas trees or whatever.
Yeah, and can we do some of them, make them look like ice skaters? If we kind of paint a representation of ice skates?
We might be able to do something, snowball fight or something.
Yes.
Make a little snowman out of something with them.
Yeah, because I can see they're actually, some of these, they're wearing some pretty nice coats. So we can really do something.
We can work on those.
And then
the letterbox.
Letterboxes. I think at least one of these we should have a thing like saying "Post to the North Pole" or something.
Yeah.
So letters to Santa. So yeah, we can do that.
Covered in snow as well. Areas of it.
And then brilliant! These are great. The Scale Scenic trees. I really love these. They're really great for setting the scene. And they've sent over evergreens as well, which is brilliant for winter. So we can make full use of those. And I think a little sprinkling of snow on them.
As if it's just the first flurry of snow, rather than a full made up.
It just mutes the green down, and I think that they're going to really frame this scene.
Right.
So there's two there. There's another one here.
Just a smaller version.
Slightly smaller version of that. But yeah, these are great trees. I've used them before, so I'm pleased they've sent that. And then we've got some of the
lichen.
The stone grey lichen. And that's the perfect starting colour.
Because it's like a frosty finish to it rather than a bright, vivid green.
So I don't think we're going to need to do an awful lot to this, but it'll make great undergrowth for part of the scene. So yeah, that's looking good. And then we've got an assortment of different scatters. So we've got grey scatter, flockage medium brown, and flockage dark brown as well. So that'll give us some of our ground cover. And then building wise,
what have we got?
I can see they've sent over a brick bridge here.
Right, so possibilities, either water coming under the bridge or a road, maybe a single track going across the top.
Well, I think this sets the levels for us, because what I see with this is have the track on a higher level.
As the back seat.
Almost like on an embankment. We can make use of the trees in an embankment up, and then maybe have the embankment keep going a little bit.
Either it's more of a road bridge than a river bridge, but it could be river if you want. But a road coming through, maybe to some houses, and a little village green and a pond that's frozen over, maybe.
Actually, if we have a pond that's frozen, we can have the people ice skating on it. I think that might be a good touch. So but you talk about buildings, but they've also sent over a toy shop.
Oh, right.
And I'm thinking
Santa's Grotto.
And there's also the railway stores, which is like a little hut, and I do like the look of that, because we can have that almost like a Santa's Grotto next door to the toy shop, and then have that as a focal point at one side of the display.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good idea.
Or we can have a whole load of like little Christmas trees.
Somebody selling them, maybe little cars with a Christmas tree on the top being, taken away.
Yeah, definitely a sort of winter/Christmas scene.
Just a little village kind of setting where people have come to collect some last minute Christmas things, Christmas trees, sweets and toys from the shops and everything.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
So maybe something that's round about 2 foot by 18 inches as a sort of diorama base.
So we've got the basic board here. You've done a lovely job. Then I've added in a mechanism for the pond. I was really keen to get this revolving, and I've managed to make something up. So
that's pretty nifty, that.
Yeah, we can get that moving. I think with the ice skaters on there, as long as we can actually get the banks coming down
to hide
the edge, but not obstruct it,
and not have it, like you were saying, too circular a looking pond, a more raggedy kind of finish to it.
Effectively, I think what we need is like a mask over the top with the cutout, and that becomes the base for the scenery.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking, we've got this bridge that they sent over. If we have the track at the back at a kind of little angle,
maybe a bit further forward.
Yeah, and then what we can do is this end of the bridge, we've got the toy shop. We can use that, even maybe raise it up if need be, and use that to hide where the track goes behind it.
Yeah.
And then at this side, we can have just like the embankment and then a bank coming down, and we can use trees to just kind of obscure where the track's going.
Disappears, yeah.
And I think
I can do some sort of drawing onto the background to emulate as if the railway lights disappearing.
And just have like a leaden sky type thing as well.
Sort of grey. I'm going to try and weather this bridge up. So just got some watercolour paint.
So it's basically the mortar you're getting.
It's just the mortar, and I'm using my fingers, but you could be a bit cleaner if you wanted and use a brush or a cotton bud or something like that. Rub
it just brings out all that detail, doesn't it?
Rub it into that, and then can wipe.
Yeah, and then you end up with it just into the...
So you get a lot of it into the cracks. It doesn't matter too much if there's places where it misses, because mortar isn't all the same colour. You'll get sort of black areas and greeny areas and white areas.
Yeah.
We'll let that dry.
I've got some watercolour pencils in like greens and browns.
I could do with those,
Yeah, we can use those.
Let that dry off. Now I'll do both sides and I'll do some of the underneath as well.
What I'm thinking of doing here is where we've got the lake, which is going to turn around with the skaters on, so it looks like they're skating in circles. I've got to build up the terrain very carefully around this to give clearance, so that this can still spin, but it looks like it's the skaters that are moving rather than the water. And how I'm going to do that is I think I'm going to build up with scrap pieces of cardboard or wood just glued around it, so that I then get a top layer that I can build almost a mask that will have the cutout of the shape of the lake, and I'll make it a little bit irregular, and then that will provide a very firm base for the scenery to be built on top of without actually sticking to this or obstructing this, and that's the important thing. So I think that's probably an early thing to do in this build, as well as the bridge that Les is working on. And once we've got those in place, we can really rock on and get the landscape in place and build up that plaster layer.
All I've done is to make a strip of the hot glue gun, and then with a sharp blade I've just scratched into it while it's still wet to make a whole series of icicles. I've done it on a scrap piece of glass, and then with a sharp blade I can peel these off. Some of them will come off in full length, or you can break them accordingly, and then you can adhere them to the building or whatever else you want to with just a little bit more hot glue gun if necessary.
I do have some speed bond PVA, and it might be...
That might work just the same.
Because it does dry quite quickly, and what I'm thinking is I just have a scrap piece of something like balsa wood and just dip the glue to it and draw it down, let it set, and then kind of lengthen it and lengthen it.
Yeah. What I've done so far is to take this polystyrene block stuff, cut it into a couple of wedges to go either side of the bridge, which is where the track's going to be. We've partly weathered up the front of the bridge there. We're not going to worry about the back because it won't be seen. And that's basically where the track's going to be laid. This will then get plaster of Paris bandages put over the top of it. The track will get ballasted in place. All of this will be mod rocked up. We might still make it slope down a little bit more rather than having a high vertical edge there.
Well, what I'm thinking here is that the toy shop,
that's right,
is going to go here, but we're going to put it on like a riser, so it's a little bit higher, and that's going to obscure where the track goes.
Yeah.
And we have it at a nice jaunty angle. I think an angle like that, then we can actually get, because it's just bare on that side, but the other three sides, including this side, has actually got some really nice detail. So I think that we can make a feature of that at a lovely angle. I'm just going to build this up a little bit higher on this side to help the top of the building here disguise where the track surface is going to be there. This will probably have brick paper put on it, something to give it a textured finish, and maybe also on that area there as it goes into the rock face.
and then this sort of area that the shop is on will be sort of grass, maybe a little bit of pavement around it, but the lower level here will have the pavement that separates the traffic from here, and there'll be a little bit more of this polystyrene put on here to make up the base. So generally speaking, that's coming on quite nicely. We'll also put a little bit more polystyrene up on the back here. We had quite a bit of packaging material in that box from Hornby. So this was just a corrugated or card paper. So I've put it through the water, wrung it out. I've now got quite a malleable sort of product that I can use to start to build a base layer for joining some of the rock work and everything. This will all get hidden under the plaster of Paris. It's not too wet and soggy that it'll go mouldy or anything.
And I'm just checking that it still goes round underneath there. So there's our pond.
The ice has been made by using a piece of cheap acrylic off a clip frame that I cut round. I then stuck it onto some black textured mount card, and the grey that's on there is literally just the splodges of where the glue was that was holding the acrylic onto the card, and it dried into this kind of grey colour. And then I scratched the surface of it as well before I stuck the acrylic onto it to give that kind of idea that the ice skaters have left marks on it. Now when that's finished and we've got everything else around it, we'll probably put some Mod Podge, which is an artist's textured acrylic, onto the top of that and stipple that on to make it look a little bit more icy. But the idea is it's sort of black and grey, which when you look at sort of a frozen river tends to be sort of just dark greys and sort of dark greens in it. So it's quite effective, but it'll look a lot better when we've got proper landscape around it.
But this has come together really well. Looking at the time, just under an hour's work, putting a layer of plaster bandage over everything. We're even going to do the road surface, and the reason for this is we've decided that the easiest and most effective way to actually do the road is we're going to build it up with emulsion paint. We've got brown water-based emulsion paint, and then put a lot of sand into that, mixed up, so it's almost like masonry paint, and that'll provide the road base, and then we're going to work from there and see just how feasible it is to do like slush effects. It's not going to be heavy snowfall. I know at the moment it looks like there's been a complete whiteout, but that's just how the plaster ends up looking. Once this is done, you kind of start out with a winter themed layout, I guess. The ground cover, you start the same way as you would for any other season. It's just how you then choose your colours to go over the top, and we're going to be doing a lot more like dead grass, no vibrant greens, and the final layer will be a dusting over of snow scatter, which we'll use some strong hairspray just to fix that in place. Sort of stuff that Hornby have sent over, what we've got to use. So we've got ash and cinders, fine grade. Put the snow to one side. We've got flockage, different shades of brown.
Might it be worth putting the buildings into position? Not yet.
Not yet. I'm getting the first layer of scatter on, and this I've chosen a brown flockage. You do like a wet mix with paint.
I do.
And you kind of live add scattering as you paint.
I also, with mine, whereas we've let the plaster dry on this, I work while the plaster's still quite wet. So I'm painting matte emulsion paints, basically because it's a cheap paint to get, into the wet plaster, and adding flock and scatter and everything at the same time, and letting it go slightly dry. I also then use a stiff brush, a hog hair brush or something like that, to wipe back to bring out some of the rock colour, the grey and the white that's already there. But it's very, very similar, but it's just a slightly different technique, but it gives the same kind of effect at the end of the day.
Yeah, I guess it's like what I always say to people. There's no right way, there's no wrong way. There's many different ways to produce the effects that you want. And even though it's winter,
there'll be some
greens.
dead grass coming through.
So You've got to remember this will get very muted down by the white snow scatter. What we've done over the top of this now, using a hairspray as the glue, is I've put a little bit of this autumn grass. Now you can get winter grass, and I was comparing it today in a shop, and the winter grass is just a little bit slightly yellower, a little bit lighter. So I decided, as I already had the autumn grass, I'd just use that. And this provides us with our kind of washed out, miserable looking winter ground, that when we start to sprinkle snow over the top, a lot of this will get very muted down.
And what I've done here is, this is the little Hornby shop. We've put the icicles on, made from the hot glue gun, which is stuck on again with hot glue gun. Initially they were done as strips and serrated with a blade to give that kind of effect. I've applied the icicles to the edges of the building in various places, under the window ledge, under the eaves of the roof and around the shop window and everything. I've used some watercolour paint and a cotton bud to smear the windows to give that kind of misty effect that you get in the winter time, and I've then used pure white watercolour on the roof to give the idea that there's quite a bit of snow that's settled on there. You can get effects purely by accident. I think that's quite how a lot of abstract artists actually do some fantastic work, not decrying them in any way, but this section here almost looks like there's snow in the air, and all I've done is I've just been smearing chalk on and rubbing it in with my finger, and this is actually sort of from the spatter that's happened when Jenny has sprayed it with the scenic glue and everything, but it's given quite a good effect.
Yeah. And that's the thing about modelling, is that sometimes these very chance accidents that you never planned make such great results. Yeah. And I think when you do modelling, you have to be a little bit flexible, and if you are prepared to be flexible, you can kind of go where the model takes you a little bit and actually make use of little accidents like that. It's not bad for what amounts to, we've probably done maybe 2.5 hours worth of work so far on it. So it just goes to show that you can put together modelling stuff very, very quickly. So what we've done here is I started planting the trees. Now that Les has done the back seam, I'm going to start working from the back forwards. And what we're going to try and do is, we've got these cheap already dusted trees, and they're going to be at the back, and then we want to use the ones that Hornby have sent as the feature trees, have them slightly further forward, and then they've sent a couple of these really nice Skaledale Scale Scenic trees, and these are going to be in the prime positions. I've used them upstairs on Weir Yard an awful lot, and they've sent over these two, a big one and a medium one, and these are, I think they're Nordic firs, and we're going to use these as feature trees more towards the foreground. So I'm probably going to have a big one there, and the medium one I'm maybe going to have down here somewhere. And what I'm doing is I'm lengthening the wires to them. Oops. I've already drilled a hole, and you can see there I've inserted a plastic tube down the hole, and the idea behind that is that because that's going through the actual textured scenery, if I just try to push wires down there, they just get caught on the plaster cloth, the insulation layer, and you just really have a difficult job to try and get them through. By pushing a spare scrap piece of plastic tube through there, the wires will just drop straight through to the underside with no hassle whatsoever. So it's just a little trick. I'm going to put a hole through for wiring. So what we're up to now is we've got some of the lights in. You can see here the actual bulbs. We've got the wires fed through, and I've now stuck this building in place. And what I'm going to do now is to hide the join. I'm going to use the glue and actually kind of lay a bead all the way around the building. And then what I'm going to use is just some of the scatter, and I'm going to just push that into the glue. So So when the glue sets, it'll just look a little bit grassy. I think the sieve actually really does make the difference.
Yeah.
It's going to be a bit of a mess around the edges, but I'm going to get some more at that back there. And I like the way you can see how, almost like how snow blows in the wind.
And it still leaves some of the underlying texture and effects.
This actually works really well. You can see there's a really good reason why we put this over the top to protect the surface of the lake, because you're not going to get snow and stuff like that all over it. So a little bit of moisture got underneath, I have to say, so we're just going to be a bit careful here.
I'll put this. Got two.
Ooh. Might need to give that a polish.
Really coming together nicely now, and now with the background, that kind of wintry landscape, you know, instead of having a white canvas, it all looks brilliant. It really does. Very, very pleased with that effect.
And I think we are golden.
What do you reckon?
I think it's come together all right.
Yes.
I mean, I was worried when the snow was about to go on. I thought, you know, I'd never done snow effects before, and I thought it was going to be either hero or zero. And actually, the snow has gone on far better than I could have imagined. I've still got to clean the track up, but that's not an issue. But everywhere else, it actually looks like it's had a dusting of snow.
And it just looks, the whole landscape, you know, the background, it all help it to make it, you know, a nice wintry scene. But there's a warmth about it. It's not an Arctic kind of scene.
It's like a Christmas
thing.
thing.
Definitely a Christmassy feel about it.
Yeah, on a tin of Christmas chocolates.
Yes.
It's that kind of winter scene that you see there. It's all happy and like, yay!
Yeah. And we know that the gizmo will work. All we've got to do when it's fully dried is to put the ice skaters on. So another sort of few days, and that'll be gone off. The lights are all fixed in. And
I just think there's some really nice touches on here.
Little Christmas tree sign and the Christmas tree on the old Anglia there. A little bonfire. I think we've got a couple more little people we could put around the bonfire when it's
there's another pack from Hornby that they sent us, so we can do some stuff with that.
And all the icicles on the buildings,
I think I was a bit apprehensive when you started work on those buildings. I thought, what's he doing? But actually, it's really come together well. But I mean, I love this effect,
the way that
with the snow and because you see.
But that's because you put all the gravel and everything on to give you that texture of the earth. So it didn't just dry as a flat surface. It's gone into the nooks and crannies. It's given the shadows.
And it's something actually which anybody's wanted to do a winter scene. You have to actually do a regular scene before the snow comes. You can't just use the snow as the final ground cover, because it's not going to work. You're not going to get these subtle colours just like you would in real life. When I turn this handle, you see the ice skaters going around, and I'm really pleased with that. It was actually one of the first things that I thought of when they asked me to do a winter stroke Christmas scene. This was actually what I was thinking of. I thought a nice little animation. But I didn't tell them about it because I thought, you know, in case it doesn't work, I don't want to look a bit foolish. But it'll also be a nice reveal. So this here is going to be a nice surprise for the good folks at Hornby. The electrics are actually fairly basic, it has to be said. I didn't want to go overboard. So we've got the two buildings, so we decided between us that we could do with lighting them up. It's always a simple addition to any layout is to light the buildings, which is really simple and effective. Then Les brought round a street light. We did think about having more than one, but again, we didn't want to really crowd it with too many lights. You can make things look a bit too much like the Las Vegas Strip if you're not careful. And then Les has the Ford Anglia that's got lights fitted and suggested that we make use of that. And little details like this are a quite simple way to bring a layout to life. And finally, we had this little bonfire effect. It's like flickering LEDs and it works off the 12 volts. And actually we've turned the voltage down a little bit just to make sure that we don't get any bleed through off the buildings. And what we're actually using to power this is the standard Hornby AC controller that just comes with any DC set. So Les has got it there, and you can control the voltage on the model just by turning the dial, and just get it just right. And it's a really good use for some of these controllers that come in set. So if you buy the set, this isn't wasted. This is gold for powering effects on your model. And then we've decided to pose the Hogwarts Castle that featured in one of the big review videos that I did for Hornby, and it just seemed appropriate that it was such a good model that it really complemented what we've got going on here.
Well, I think Jen's covered most of what we've done there. We've got some very nice Christmassy effects. We've got the postman, we've got the snow on the telephone box and the letterbox, the icicles on the building, even the little sign we managed to do, Xmas trees for sale, pick your own. And we've used little N-gauge sort of trees there to give you the idea of the trees that you go along and pick up. And the tractor's got a trailer with some trees loaded on that they're bringing in. And the people in the Anglia have already bought theirs and put it on the roof and strapped it on. So there's lots of little details that we've added to it. Yes, you could go on and on and on and on, adding more and more to it, but we had to work within a reasonable time constraint, and I think generally speaking we've created a very rich tapestry for this little winter wonderland scene that Hornby asked us to do.
Final touches now. I've got the lake surface adjusted. I wedged a little distance piece in, and that now means that it moves freely off the winding handle. That in turn has let me glue the skaters onto the pond, so we've got a really nice effect where they appear to just be skating in circles. And it's just a nice little animation that shows that they don't need to be all that complicated to add something to the model. And finally, we thought no winter Christmas scene would be complete without Santa, with his reindeer giving out a few presents to the children. So we've also got that now represented on the model. And the final piece, the final piece, is we thought Hogwarts Castle would be the perfect locomotive to display on the short length of track. So it all comes together now, and the final scene is visible in its entirety. It's really nice to actually see all those ideas that we talked about at the beginning and how they evolved throughout the build, to see them really just come together as this unified whole, and it is quite gratifying actually. I'm really pleased with the end result that we've got here.